Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Community Conversations with the Family and Youth Institute. I'm Danyal Khan, the Executive Director at the FYI, and I'm here today with Dr. Omar Shareef, and we're talking Muslim men and mental health. Dr. Omar is a community educator at the Family and Youth Institute and a practicing psychiatrist at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center in Queens, New York. He holds an MD and MBA from St. George's University and completed his residency at Nassau University Medical Center, followed by a fellowship in public psychiatry and certification in psychodynamic psychotherapy at Columbia University. He's also a certified adult mental health first aid instructor and a member of the HEAL Collective, a nonprofit focused on Muslim mental health. And with that being said, let's welcome Dr. Omar. Thank you for being here, man.
Hey, thank you. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Dan, for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here as part of FYI's debut podcast series. So for everyone who's listening in right now, you guys are starting with something really awesome here with us. So for myself, it's an honor to be here. Jazakallah khair, bro.
I know, of course. So before we get started with all the fancy questions, I want to first start to get to know you better, right? Someone who's watching this, they're meeting Dr. Omar Shareef for the first time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and let us know what brought you into the mental health work and got you to do the work that you're doing right now.
Got it. So I know that bio that you gave in the beginning probably sounded a little extra, a little intimidating. But I want to assure everybody that, everything you heard Dan say about me are really just all credentials. The truth of the matter is that I'm Omar. Before I ever became Dr. Shareef, I was Omar. And Omar is someone who, went to medical school with this belief that, I want to help people and having this dream that, I just want to save a life. And a lot of that's rooted in sort of the Islamic concept of if you save one life, it's as if you've saved all of humanity. And I sort of had that, dream for myself. That's what I want to do. And when I was going through this entire process of pre-med, and then from pre-med, going to medical school and from med school into residency, I really struggled a lot. It was a really rough ride. About it, and I struggled a lot. I went through a lot of challenges and difficulties internally for myself with my motivation, with my own mental health, going through depressive episodes, existential episodes, also questioning why I'm even doing any of this and what's the point and purpose behind all of it. And it might surprise people to hear this, but I actually didn't want to do mental health. That wasn't even my original dream. I wanted to do emergency medicine. I want to be an ER doctor because I watched these shows and you would see a patient getting helicoptered into the hospital and they're bringing out the stretcher and they're we got to save this guy's life. You see the EKG beeping, you see the defibrillator where they're saying clear and they're the patient's chest heaves and the guy's we did it, we saved their life. And I was that's the coolest thing. I want that. That's what I want. That excitement, that whole grandeur behind it. And I think once I actually got into medical school and was getting into my third year, I think I really quickly realized that this isn't exactly the kind of idealized, romanticized view of medicine that I thought it was. I became someone who was very jaded and cynical towards the system that I was in. The system was kind of grinding me and breaking me down, and I wasn't having much faith in the system itself as a result. And I think at the end of it, after really struggling quite a bit, it really opened my eyes to maybe mental health is something that I should consider, because rather than having a multi-million-dollar ER apparatus, CT, MRI, suite to save a patient's life, in psychiatry, you really just need 2 chairs and a conversation, and I could save someone's life. And that to me really hit the very core of what I felt was the most humanistic aspect of medicine, which is I'm to treat a patient in which I cannot scan for an illness. There's no X-ray or CT or MRI that'll reveal a mental illness to someone. There's no blood test to draw that'll instantly tell me what a diagnosis is for a patient's mental illness. There's no way to know what someone is suffering from without having a really deep and intimate conversation. And that to me was like bringing medicine back to its very roots, which is the human to human connection. That's what really drew me, towards mental health and psychiatry in particular.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, man. I actually didn't know that you wanted to be an ER doctor and then you transitioned to psychiatry.
Thank God. Let me just say thank God. No, if there's any ER folks or any med students who are listening, I'm not going to knock it. Amazing, incredible field. Don't get me wrong. But, my understanding of ER, Dan, was really that like it's incredibly, incredibly high burnout and stress in that field. And it really wasn't the kind of lifestyle that I was, really aiming for. I think, for me, this was the field that I think my heart was really attached to.
Yeah. And just to give our audience like a little bit of insight to the work that you do right now, like ever since you've become a doctor, it's not just in front of a chair that you've been speaking. You've been speaking at conferences, you speak at third spaces, primary spaces. You've had definitely the privilege to make impact not only on a micro scale, where any ER doctor would do, right? But also on a macro scale, like speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of people. Mashallah.
Jazakallah, thank you. You are definitely gassing me up.
No.
I think this is something that I have to give a shout out to a couple of things. First is that before I even did any of this academic stuff, I was part of YM, Young Muslims youth group. And for me, that was like my first taste of like doing Islamic work and doing community level work. And I really have to credit YM for like bridging me into this world. And then from there, I got involved in MIST when I was in high school, Muslim Interscholastic Tournament. And that's what really linked me into, providing, Islamic oriented academic, activities for youth. And from there, a lot of the activism, I think, blossomed in college, where I figured to myself, like, if I'm going to treat a sick patient, I'm only going to help that one patient in that one appointment at that one time. If I treat a sick system, then I will be able to help hundreds of patients on a much broader scale, and be able to make like a much bigger impact. And I think that's what sort of minded me towards community and like systems-based, work. And I think that's what led ultimately to this feeling of I want to get an MBA, so I can understand the healthcare system itself, see where it's broken and see where it's dysfunctional, and actually help to like advocate or build or like create something that's more functional and better, so I can impact like patient care on a bigger scale than one-on-one. When you take that and combine it with Islamic work, you now have a very systems-based Islamic mindset where, yeah, sure, I could sit in a clinic office and I could have one Muslim walking through the door and I can help that Muslim with like their mental health issues. That's great. Fantastic. I'm not going to knock any of that. It's beautiful, mashallah, to do that. However, imagine if at a khutbah or at a halaqah or at like an MSA event or, at a third space or at like a masjid or even here right now on this podcast, like imagine if like the tenets of the field of psychology, Islamically integrated psychology, psychiatry, and like mental health could be integrated, packaged, delivered in a way that makes it accessible and digestible for Muslim audiences, so that rather than helping one patient in one clinic room, I could help reach hundreds or thousands of people with a message. And so this is, Dan, where like I guess a lot of it kind of coalesced and clicked for me. It's why I'm here with you right now in the FYI, doing the work that we're doing.
No, this is great. I love how you put it. Instead of treating a sick individual, treating the sick system. And I'll probably pivot there with a question I have for you. So, understanding that framework, understanding like the systemic challenges that we face as a community, and then knowing that the topic today is on Muslim mental health when it comes to men's mental health. Sure. What do you think are systemic challenges that are affecting men negatively, especially when it comes to Muslim men?
Man, it's a lot, Dan. It's a heavy question because it's so intricate. I know the pop psychology answer, and the pop psychology answer will pretty much just package it into like one or two bullet points, put it up as a cute little Instagram post or like a TikTok or whatever, and then disseminate that as like the reason that like, oh, like it's culture that does this to men, or it's society that does this to men, and like, sure, it's a piece of it, but it's very reductive. I think if you take my example, like I grew up in New York, born here, raised here in New York, as a young Muslim man, and I got to tell you that like for me, it's a whole range of issues that impacted the way I grew up and how I perceived my masculinity and my manhood, and a lot of it really does come down to the family. My own father. And my uncles and my little brother and my male cousins, like the immediate men in my family that sort of gave me this role model or this perspective of like, well, what is masculinity? How are they acting? How am I acting? Like, what actually shows me what success looks like, or what strength looks like, or what a lot of the morals and values imbued in like masculinity look like. So that would be the first thing. When you take a bigger step back from the family, then it was like my school, and it was the guys at school, and like the way guys at school acted, and the way guys at school, their demeanor with how they would carry themselves, what they would wear, how they would talk, how they would act, and all that. Who was seen as cool, who was seen as lame, what was cringe, and what was like considered like like awesome or like trend setting for that. And then we take an even bigger step from that. Then you have like the larger New York American, society. And when you take all of this and like cram it together into just me, Omar, as like an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old, it's going to like really create a very, I don't know what the word is, like a very modeled caricature, a painting almost, where like it doesn't really flow together. It's a cacophony almost of like what masculinity feels like, because you get 100 different conflicting messages and signals and role modeling, and then you kind of have to make sense of it yourself. And that was sort of the way I grew up. I grew up confused. I grew up without really like having a strong grasp over what this was. I grew up very insecure about myself, insecure about the way I looked, the way I conducted myself, the way I acted, the way I dressed. I really had low self-esteem, low self-value. And I was being given a lot of antidotes for it. Antidotes that were toxic, antidotes that were negative, antidotes that were half-baked or half-hearted, antidotes that were manipulative, and then antidotes that were actually, healthy and constructive. But then you kind of have to like discern between what's healthy and healthy for you, and like how could you really expect a young boy to like figure this out? So that gives you at least an idea, Dan, of like what we're looking at that actually influences like Muslim men, in America. I can't give you one answer. It's like 15 different answers as to what affects you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing that. Like just trying to navigate through all that obviously is going to come with challenges, right? And then when we're talking about like, people who are around you, right? In my case, like the lack of, right? Not having a father figure, not having like those positive role models, but then looking for it on the internet and looking for it you shouldn't be looking for, right? You can like one can only imagine the mental health challenges that come with it, right? Because then you hear like these statements that are like tenets of manhood, and you kind of have to follow them without understanding maybe the Islamic lens or the mental health lens to it. And are these things that are genuinely good for you, right? Like because the nuance behind those statements are not really, or misinterpreted or misunderstood. Or the motivations behind it is not really understood too. And I mean, you can't blame a lot of young adults for not understanding that. I would ask you here, like, obviously you've experienced yourself, and now you're a professional, you're a clinician now addressing these challenges. What do you think would be the common challenges that young men face as a result of trying to navigate through these things? I can probably think of a few from my head, but I want to hear from you. What are things that in your practice and the work that you're doing when you're out there in the community talking to young folks, young men in particular, what are the themes that you're noticing that they're experiencing today?
A few things. I'm gonna say, one of the ones that come to the forefront for me, honestly, is identity crisis. I think comes at the forefront of a lot of young men being insecure and not having a strong sense of self, of who they are, what they are, or how they want to portray themselves. And the second major issue that I'm seeing on top of that is loneliness. A lot of loneliness and isolation. And you would think that with the advent of a lot of guys live their social lives on online, like gaming online or on Discord, you're on Xbox Live, or or like the whole gaming sphere is where you see a lot of men, like young men, connecting. The truth is that you're still alone doing this. You're by yourself at your battle station in your bedroom, with a headset on. You're still by yourself, communicating with other guys, of course, and the context of your connection to other men, to other human beings, is virtual. It's digital, which brings about its own, challenges and difficulties. It's convenient, sure, but it also comes with its own set of challenges. And I think there's a real serious loneliness and isolation that comes of this, that a lot of men really don't know how to attach or how to have a sense of healthy camaraderie or healthy brotherhood with others. And then, of course, the final piece, so the first one being that identity crisis, of just not understanding what is masculinity, what is manhood, who and what are you, how do you portray yourself and see yourself. And then secondly, of course, the isolation and the loneliness. The third one is actually the rebound, the counter to that, which is, I think, the biggest threat to a lot of us as very vulnerable young men, is the predatory masculinity that comes in. And this is where a lot of the poison seeps in, where if you take an insecure, lonely young kid, young boy, and you feed him with a lot of unhealthy, twisted, contorted, manipulative visions and characters and standards of masculinity, you transform him into whatever mold or make or model is for whoever that boy models himself after. In this case, this is where you have, Andrew Tate come into the picture. This is where you have a lot of the Jordan Peterson brand of stuff, or this is where you have a lot of, Sneeko, Aiden Ross, and this is where you have this sinister seeping in of red pill, and the red pill ideology, and the alt-right pipeline, which paints your masculinity as you poor, disaffected young man. Here's the solution for your insecurity and your loneliness and your isolation, and everything that you're feeling negatively about yourself, which is to be the opposite of that. And that's to create this unhealthy version of you, this hyper masculine alpha, misogynistic, sexist version of you, and then paint that as this is health. This is what a healthy man looks like. These are the three major things, Dan, that I would point out. There's a lot more nuance to it, but just on the surface level, I would paint these three things as some of the biggest things that I'm seeing affecting young men.
No, I love it. Identity crisis, loneliness and isolation, predatory masculinity. And I appreciate you sharing some examples. Yeah, there's a lot of gurus out there, very charismatic, really, regardless of what their political affiliations look like or what their philosophical affiliations look like, there definitely seems to be an extreme in the pendulum swinging left and right. And, one of the things about Islam that I love is it takes a balanced approach when it comes to handling things. But I guess I'm going to ask you a question just to probe a little bit more into this.
Sure.
Let's say I'm a parent of a teenager, or I am a teenager myself, and I'm looking for guidance because I don't have that locally, or I don't feel comfortable, because I don't have the skills or, the confidence to, navigate the world in a social space, societal space. So I'm going to rely on, the easy access of social media and, different platforms like YouTube. What are the big red flags that you would advise parents and younger folks to keep in mind when determining who is a good person to, like, or to listen to, right? Because there's so much convincing stuff out there and you don't even realize it, but just spending like an extra few seconds on one video will get your algorithm to just like, shove so much things down your throat, regardless of like, what extreme it leans in on. How can we what are things that we should be looking out for to ensure that we're looking at things that are healthy for us and good for us and not harmful for us and those around us?
Sure. So I'm going to give a two-part answer for this one. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is going to be, well, let's just talk about red flags. What are the red flags that you should look out for? And the red flags that you should look out for really is the packaging of the red pill sort of ideology and the red pill movement, for this. And red pill mixes quite a bit with a lot of other ideologies. A lot of it is like alt-right. A lot of it can be going to even greater extremes in ideology, perhaps even like if you want to talk about like, Nazi adjacent or like white supremacist adjacent, ideologies. And so a lot of this is like a slippery slope down, like you're saying, like all it really takes is just a couple of videos. And then all of a sudden you're sucked into an entire algorithm that feeds into whatever it is, whatever content it is that you're, consuming. So the first thing that I would point out would be sort of the sense of self for your young boy. How does he actually see himself and how does he perceive himself? And the only way to really do this is to have a conversation, about this. And if you're having the conversation after they have consumed a lot of this online content, it's going to be an uphill battle for you because you've kind of already lost them. How often does like a father sit down with his son and have like a genuine heart-to-heart conversation on masculinity versus how many hours of content does this boy consume on his phone or on his tablet or on his PC? And when you compare the two, Dan, it's almost like an unwinnable battle for a parent. It's like impossible. There's no way you as a parent will provide enough in-person, education and counseling and guidance as opposed to the counterbalance of how much this kid is consuming online. So like the conversation really has to be about, what do you perceive as a healthy sense of self? And I wouldn't even attach it to like gender per se. The red flag for this is that things are very hyper gendered when really they're not. For us at the Family and Youth Institute, emotion is not gendered. There's no gender to emotion. It's just emotion. Emotion's a human thing, not a male or female thing, for that. But if you notice that your child has a very strong fixation on emotion and gender, having a particular linkage, to that. Men don't do X. Men don't say Y. Men don't do this. Men don't act like that. Women need to be like this, or women should do that, or women act like Y, or women act like X. This is what I mean. This is the first major red flag that I would point out. Like hyper fixation on gender and emotion. This is where you know that there's a problem here. There's an issue here, and it's a double-edged sword. That your child is likely being harmed by this perception, and it's also harming others with this perception as well. Because none of the relationships are going to be healthy relationships when your child has a very contorted or twisted view of how certain genders should act and behave for that. Second major red flag that I would point out would be grandiosity, an inflated sense of self. Where if you notice that like your young boy is acting like alpha, or is telling you that like I'm better than other boys, or I'm stronger than other boys, or I'm smarter than other boys, like this is what makes me better. And you're noticing that a lot of it is really rooted in a grandiose perception of who and what they are as in comparison to others, around them. And this is where there's a categorization of manhood and masculinity, that I am more masculine than others, or I am more macho than others. It's aggressive, it's confrontational, it's hostile, and it is reductionist. This is another major red flag to look out for, because this sort of signals to a parent or signals to a young teenager that your world is becoming very black and white. It's good or it's bad. It's evil or it's righteous. It's masculine or it's feminine. It's alpha or it's beta, and that's it. There's no nuance and there's no gray to any of this. You're either on the winning side or the losing side. For yourself. Pick a side. What would you rather be on? For that. And when you create this world for a young boy in which it is completely black and white, then you're setting him up for failure. That he's not going to be able to navigate nuance. He's not going to be able to navigate being challenged. He's not going to be able to navigate cooperation. He's not going to be able to navigate fragility of his own emotions, because his mindset will not allow for that kind of fragility. So these are the red flags to talk about for that. The second major thing, the two-part to my answer, is going to be, you cannot look out for red flags or catch red flags or even understand what a red flag is if you don't have a connection to your son. If the family child dynamic or the parent child dynamic is fundamentally distant or dysfunctional or broken or aloof, you're not going to be able to know this, because you don't know your child. You actually don't know who or what your son is. And so your son can very easily wear one mask in front of you and then completely take the mask off when he's somewhere else. You don't even know your son at that particular point. You don't have that kind of bond, to be able to talk to them. Having that kind of bond requires that your young boy, little tiny boy, needs to learn what healthy emotions are, how to express healthy emotions, and how to have healthy attachments and trust between him and his parents. So that when he is consuming content that is contrary, or content that is scary, or content that's confusing, he can come to you and ask for clarification. He can come to you and open a dialogue. I watched an Andrew Tate video, and he talked about how women are supposed to be property. Can you help me understand this? And it's not him being confrontational with you or him being argumentative. It's genuinely a young, confused boy coming to you and asking that my worldview is kind of in flux, and I don't really grasp or understand this. It's going to require two things for you as a parent. First thing it's going to require is that you as a parent are in a healthy emotional state yourself. If you yourself are emotionally damaged, or you yourself are deeply insecure, or you yourself don't understand your own masculinity as a father, you're going to have a pretty hard time helping your son navigate this, because you yourself don't have a healthy sense of it. That would be the first thing, which is, what is the state of your health as a father, as an uncle, as a male cousin, whoever you might be listening to this podcast? Where's the state of your masculinity? How healthy is your self-image and self-esteem when you're helping this young boy navigate that? And then the part two will be what kind of world you craft for him, the space you craft for him between yourselves as two men, conversing about this. Are you someone who will judge him? Are you someone who will deride him? Are you someone who will put him down? Are you someone who's going to insult him? Are you someone who's going to push his kid away? Are you going to be someone who mocks his kid? What is the response you're going to give towards this child? And the response that you give will likely be what either creates him or breaks him in this relationship. Because then if the relationship between you and this young boy is fraught, then you better believe he's not going to come to you for advice. He won't come to you for guidance. He won't come to you for anything. He's going to go where he feels safe, where he feels validated, where he feels respected, where he feels that everyone wants him. And that's going to be the manosphere. That's going to be online. That's going to be with his friends. That's going to be in his algorithm, or wherever he consumes all this content. So you've effectively lost him in that regard. So it's important for you as the older male role model in this case to be able to build that trust, have that strong sense of self-esteem, that strong sense of healthy masculinity for yourself, and then be able to create the space in which you could have emotional conversation between you and this young boy. That's these are two parts that I would say, Dan. A little heavy. I know I threw out a lot. My apologies for.
No. This is great stuff. I was thinking as you were talking, because I have two boys that I'm raising myself right now. My older one being turning 6, and my younger one 3.
My heart goes out to you, bro.
I see a lot of I think a lot about these things. One thing I recently came across was the idea of not being the first bully that your child has to navigate through, because if you're going to be the first bully for your son, and you're teaching them to submit and stuff like that, and you're modeling a behavior that is not the way you want them to behave when they're adults,
Mm-hmm.
then you shouldn't be surprised when they behave the way you taught them to behave.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate this stuff. This definitely was a lot to take in. I was like writing as you were speaking.
I do want to
asked,
say something, by the
yeah, go
way.
ahead. Go
This is
ahead.
important. I don't mean to cut you off, but I
No,
want the listeners and people watching this to know that Dan took his kids out to the woods on a camping trip, and he was posting this stuff on his social media. And there's a picture in which he is roasting marshmallows and making s'mores, I think, if memory, like,
yeah.
if I recall properly. And you're sitting next to your son, and this kid has like the biggest smile on his face and is like excited and like engaging with you. And it's like this beautiful father-son moment that you captured, the two of you next to a campfire roasting marshmallows together. And I gotta tell you, man, like I love that so much, that you have opened a world for yourself. Like, you're an outdoorsman, you're a nature guy, you're someone who loves to like unplug, go off the grid, go do your own thing. And you have actually shared that world of who and what you are as a man with your young boy. And like, you could see it like in his eyes, the way he engages with you. I gotta say, dude, like, we can lecture all day about like, blah blah blah, do this, talk about that, and all that stuff, but like, that's it. Like, that right there, Dan. Like, anyone listening, like, this is what healthy masculinity looks like. It's a father engaging with his boys and taking them out and showing them his world, being open, being vulnerable, just like expressing who and what you are and what made you who and what you are to your boys. Like, this kind of stuff is unspoken. Like, you don't have to like lecture a kid on this stuff. So like, if any like father or any like brother or any cousin is listening to this, I'm not telling you to lecture young boys on like, what's good, what's bad. I'm telling you to share, connect, bond with them. That's what I'm telling you to do. Like, Dan's showing you how to do it, with these young boys. That's the connect. I love you, man. I gotta say, when you
I
did
love
that,
you.
it made it touch my heart.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, this episode's about you, so I'm not gonna comment, but
You're right.
you touched on something that I think is important for us to recognize, is that there is this perception that men should not feel, and they should tell people how to behave, and especially when it comes to masculinity. I love the way you said it. Is we're not looking to lecture you. We're looking. It's important for you to show, right, through your actions and stuff like that. I think I shared with you that growing up, I personally didn't have the luxury of learning from someone who could teach me what healthy masculinity looked like. And I'm sure there's members of the audience, people who are watching this, who are in that position. They're no longer young. They're probably maybe college age or young professional. They already have their beliefs in place. They've navigated through it the best way possible, but they still have limiting beliefs. Like, for example, a big one being, real men don't talk about their problems, right? They hide behind stoic ideas that are aspirational, but obviously limiting and prevented, like they're reductioning, right? Like reducing their ability to express. What are things that you would say to someone who believes that, is questioning it, right? Because they're noticing that it's not really serving them that well, and they're hearing this.
This harkens back to a conversation you and I had, actually, when we were talking about this, and I think I really like the way you phrased it, Dan. So I'm going to repeat it here for that, which is that, like, when you see the way masculinity is being packaged and sold on social media, like on TikTok, on Discord, in gaming, in whatever avenue in this manosphere that we have for young boys consuming content, what you'll notice is that much of the packaging and much of delivery of this is pinpointing and targeting weakness and insecurity in young boys in particular. This perception that, like, this is what strength is and this is what security is. That, like, a strong, secure man is a man who's like alpha, or a man who's like sigma, in that you are someone who is isolative. You are someone who's like a lone wolf. You're someone who is stoic. You're someone who is not allow any emotion to come through. Because, like I said before, emotion is gendered. Where if you show a lot of emotion, or you show a lot of vulnerability, you show a lot of like emotional expressiveness, that's very effeminate. It's a very feminine thing, to do that. So you're less masculine because of this. It's a very stupid way of like grasping it. But honestly, the reason why it's packaged this way and sold is because it's very digestible for a young boy. It connects to the heart. It's like, I'm hearing all these esoteric, like, khutbahs and like halakha lectures about like, well, let's talk about like the Sahaba, or let's talk about like the Islamic paradigms of masculinity and like of manhood, of like futua, and all of that. But the thing is that the packaging of it, the delivery of it, doesn't meet them where they're at. You're not speaking in a language that these young boys are grasping and absorbing, for themselves. Social media is connecting to them in a way 100 times faster and 1,000 times more potent than whatever you can do on your own. And so, what I would say, Dan, to answer your question, is the most vulnerable thing that a man can do is to actually open up about that insecurity and that vulnerability, about that pain, about that hurt, about that isolation, that loneliness, that poor self-image, poor self-esteem, lack of father figures, or lack of like, older men figures, whatever it may be that is ailing this young boy, and to actually express it. So a lot of the social media manosphere packaged masculinity identifies the proper symptoms. The symptoms are all there, and they're acknowledging the symptoms of what these young boys are suffering from and experiencing. But the treatment is where we have the problem. This is where, like, I think you and I, Dan, would like vehemently disagree with like the treatment of it, because the solution being pitched to these young boys is toxic. It's poison. It's like they're giving you a pill, telling you this is medicine, but the truth is it's poison. It's actually harming you, harming your family, harming like the other men in your life, and probably most importantly, it's harming a lot of the women in your life. And eventually the woman that you like form a bond or a relationship with, it's going to harm that too and poison that as well. So the treatment itself is where the problem is, because the solution being pitched is one of take your emotion, whatever your emotion is, suppress it, swallow it, bury it, get rid of it, and create a caricature, or create a mask of who and what you are, and model it after me. And the me would be whatever influencer or whatever like male role model or whatever like masculine ideology is being pitched to you that unfortunately for you, you fall into. You don't really realize that you've kind of bought into it, because it's so subtle the way a lot of this is packaged and sold to like young boys. So like my message to any like young men listening, to this, who feel confused about their emotions, who feel confused about like the messaging being given to them, what I would honestly tell you is that there is a natural fitra, a natural inclination that Allah has given you as young boys, as young men, towards enjoining good and forbidding evil, towards being inclined towards that there's goodness in this, and there's like something reprehensible in that. And your world is being flipped upside down, where what's being sold to you online is that, being emotionally stoic, or like reserving yourself, or like judging others, or like putting other people down to elevate yourself, or putting women down to like elevate yourself. There should be a feeling inside of you that something here just feels off, or doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem to click or connect. And for a lot of young boys, it breaks my heart to say this, Dan, but for a lot of young boys, oftentimes the wake-up call isn't until they experience their first heartbreak, or experience their first broken relationship, or experience their first abandonment, or experience the first friendship that falls out because of this. Because honestly speaking, a lot of this stuff is being packaged and sold to you, but then when you actually put it into practice, you sort of see the effect of it. That when you're sold on a medication that is actually poisoning you, you're going to poison others in your life, and you're going to wind up even lonelier, even more insecure, and you're going to feel even worse off about yourself as a result of this. So like, that's my message to young boys, which is like, look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself the hard question, the difficult question. Are you happy? Are you genuinely happy? Are you satisfied with what you look like, who you look like, who you're trying to be, and what you're trying to be like? My honest answer, and I know this for myself too, because I was there, the answer is no. The answer is no. That I am insecure, I am miserable, I am sad, I am lonely, I am hurt, I'm confused, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to act. I don't know what to be. I know what I don't want to be, but I don't know how to be this. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to find these people. I don't know how to become who and what I'm supposed to become. You're selling me on like these incredible stories of the Sahaba, but like this to me is so like, it's such a far off goal that I don't even know how to achieve that or how to get there or do that. And then all the examples of like Muslim masculinity to me are things that I've been wounded by or hurt by. So like, how, Omar, can you really expect me to do this? Like, that's why I'm really beseeching a lot of like the male viewers or listeners that are like here. I really need to tell you that like your version of masculinity really truly comes from vulnerability, and your vulnerability being sown as a sign of strength and not weakness. I want you to sort of think the opposite of everything. If you're being sold on being stoic, be the opposite of stoic. Actually be emotionally communicative, be emotionally open, be emotionally raw, and be emotionally honest about what you're thinking and feeling. If you're being sold on isolation and loneliness actually being a strength, the truth is it's actually not. That your brotherhood, your connection to other boys, your connection to other men, the way you socialize, the way you connect, the way you go out and play sports together, or go out hiking together, or go out doing stuff together, or gaming together, whatever it is that you do, your connectedness to other people is actually a form of strength, for you. And the final thing, which is your relationship in terms of where you are with women. If you're being sold on an ideology that has to demean women or put women down or make women subservient to you or make you someone dominant over them, then what I would tell you is do the opposite. Actually tell yourself, well, what if I actually flipped it? And what if I actually showed deference? Or what if I showed respect? Or if I showed honor? Or what if I gave dignity? Or what if I imbued this kind of placement of women in a higher stature than what I'm being sold on? And what you're realizing that everything that I'm telling you right now is actually low-key Islamic. Everything here that I just talked about is Islamic, but it's just not being packaged and sold to you that way. So like, you kind of see where I'm coming from, where like the Islamic paradigm of masculinity naturally connects to your fitra. It's already there. It's just that you have to sort of be guided towards that in a way that like speaks to you and that you can be like egosyntonic with. So like that's kind of a lengthy answer, but like, Dan, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this. And building off of it, earlier you were also talking about like khutbahs and stuff and how sometimes like the messaging is important, but they kind of miss the mark. Mm-hmm. Let's say our viewer is in a position where like, you know what, okay, I'm in the mirror after this, I'm having like this crisis. I'm like, you know what, I've answered all these questions, but I know, okay, this is where I am. I'm not happy with myself as a person. I'm not happy with, how I'm seeing myself and my relationships, and I want to work on it, but I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for an answer. And usually when you ask that question to a Muslim man, Muslim woman, any Muslim, the answer would be like, you know what, go to your local masjid, go to your imam and stuff like that. However, I'm sure with your experience, I've experienced this sometime, we do know, despite knowing that these are issues, that these still seem to be taboo topics that shuyukh and imams and youth directors struggle to address in an appropriate manner, whether it is understanding how to translate prophetic traditions and stories into modern day context, or whether it is making sure that you're informed with current practices in the mental health space, right? Two-part question. Question one, why do you think we're still facing this problem despite the increase in resources? And we're seeing a huge increase in Muslim organizations that are, FYI being one of them, that like produces all this content, resources, toolkits, trainings, whatever out there. And it's out there, it's accessible. There's a lot of many other organizations that are doing the same thing. But still, there seems to be taboo, we don't talk about this. We don't talk about the repercussions of this. We don't talk about addiction. We don't talk about the suicide rates. We don't talk about premarital relationships and why that comes, right? As a result of the isolation and loneliness. And then, so that's one. And then number two would be, what would be advice you would give to a community organizer, a youth director, an imam, a board who is thinking about like, you know what, I know these are problems because my kids and their friends or the local youth group have escalated to me that these are problems. What do I do about
it? I really have not seen much of a pushback, on this from our end, meaning such that if there's going to be like this fire hose of content online, which speaks like disaffected, young men, I don't see a healthy counter from any Muslim community. I don't actually see events around this. I don't actually see topics on masculinity, topics on manhood, topics on like, sex education, topics on like gender relationships and like how does one actually conduct themselves, around this. I don't actually see a lot of this as part of curriculums in Islamic schools or part of curricula in like Sunday school or part of like curricula as part of like youth halakas. I don't see it as the topic of khutbas. I don't actually see it as like the topic of like general events that a community does. The Muslim community has not actually given a platform or a space for a lot of this. And if your community does, then like, mashallah, shout out to you. Like one person I'll definitely give a huge shout out to is Sheikh Abdullah Duro, who I think has kind of led the charge on this by showing that you can combine Islamic scholarship with a very healthy perception of like masculine strength and like masculine energy, and combine the two in a way that creates a whole sense of self. He's done it really well and he's kind of modeled this. But unfortunately, I'm pointing out like one sheikh amongst like 20,000 and like showing you like how huge the imbalance is in our communities. And unfortunately, because of this, where do our young boys go for this guidance and this leadership? They're not going to go to a masjid for this guidance and leadership because there is no space for it. There is no conversation about this. They're not going to learn about anything over here. In fact, what they will learn about, they will perceive as like, well, this is archaic, this is backwards, this is not actually functional for me, it's not applicable for me, with what I'm dealing with at school or what I'm dealing with at university or what I'm dealing with at like work. You're not actually speaking to me about what my needs are and what I need from this. And of course, I'm willing to bet you there's probably a lot of sheikhs and a lot of students of knowledge listening going like, we've been screaming and shouting from the rooftops, about all the Islamic concepts that like apply to this. But again, I'm going to keep saying it. It's about your package and it's about your delivery. It's about how you talk about this and the way you bond. Remember what I said before, that like, I think boys are being talked to death about all this stuff. Very, very little is being shown, however, for that. So for example, like I'm going to give you like just a quick shout out. I remember I saw on Instagram, I forgot where I saw, but there's a sheikh who after Taraweeh will actually, with his Jama'ah, will do push-ups afterwards. He'll actually challenge his Jama'ah to do like push-ups.
Islamic Society of Baltimore.
Thank you. Islamic Society of Baltimore.
We're big fans of their work.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about this stuff, I think about, okay, here's an imam who's actually showcasing that your deen can actually combine with a stronger, more masculine and more durable and built body. I can actually help you with both the insecurity you have spiritually and the insecurity you have physically. And for me, that's a huge connection that a lot of boys don't find in an Islamic environment, in a Muslim environment, or in like, an MSA environment. It's really not there, for that. So like to speak to a community about this, what I would recommend about this stuff is to do exactly what Dan and I were talking about, which is if you want to get boys to bond, if you want to get healthy conversations on masculinity, have a masjid men's camping trip, have a masjid men's hiking group, have a masjid men's boating trip, actually go fishing, go bring your boys out somewhere and bond with them and connect with them and actually have conversations about that. And don't be lecturing, listen, like put your finger on like the pulse for what these young boys are suffering from and struggling from and dealing with. And then actually have the conversation about this stuff, because I'm not going to perceive this as a lecture or a halakha or perceive this as like you're shoving Islam down my throat. I'm going to perceive this as there are men in my life who care enough about me to actually notice me, to take my hand and to guide me towards something that I haven't experienced or haven't done before, for that. If you're having like, paintball, with a bunch of guys, bring them out, load them up with armor and gear, have them like, do that stuff. If you want to give them that Call of Duty experience, give your young boys a Call of Duty experience. Like do it as a masjid community. You don't need a sheikh or imam for this. You just need a couple of men willing to like put down their busy lives and actually spend time with like young boys doing this stuff. If you want to be in the gaming sphere, have a masjid gaming tournament hosted by your masjid. Bring the boys outside of their rooms and bring them into your masjid to do this stuff. Like all these ideas I'm pitching for like how to see these disaffected, lonely, isolated young boys and to connect them back to community in a context that is Islamic, but not one that's being shoved down their throat.
Yeah.
This is something that I would recommend for a lot of communities for this stuff. There should be workout groups. There should be jogging groups. There should be like athletic groups. There should be like athletic teams for, your masjid. There should be organizations in your masjid to actually talk about sex education, to talk about pornography, to talk about infidelity, to talk about like to actually have spaces that are healthy for boys to come and like bring their insecurities, bring their weaknesses, to bring their vices, and actually find that. We're great at creating musallas and places of prayer, but we suck at like actual community building. The masjid was never intended to be a place of just prayer. The masjid was intended, like the way we have masajid now is that they are country clubs for like the spiritually elite. When the truth is that the entire core of the sunnah of what the masjid is that the masjid was a rehabilitation center for the spiritually sick. And our young boys have lost that. They don't feel a connection to that at all. And I don't blame them. I mean, when you see a country club and when you see like an online gaming sphere, where would I rather feel more comfortable? Obviously, I'm going to go to where I feel more comfortable. So that would be like my big message to anyone listening, which is if you're a community organizer, if you're a masjid board member, if you're a sheikh or imam and you're listening to this, what is the men's programming in your masjid? Do you even have men's programming in your masjid? And if you don't, this is where you start with it. This is where you build on this. This is where you create this, for yourself. And I promise you, I genuinely promise you this. I never had this growing up. That's why I know how precious it is. But like I've only entered into a lot of these men's groups and all these men's events like in my like third decade of life. I wish this existed for me earlier. All I had were young Muslims, and the only thing young Muslims was able to even do in our masjid was just one halaqah once a week and to go out and hang out at a restaurant. It's really it. But when you really have a masjid that cares enough about their Muslim young boys, you create an entire ecosystem around them.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting with what you just said? So two things that I want to reflect with you. One, as a psychiatrist, that like I had like preconceived notions of what kind of advice you were going to give.
Oh yeah.
And
you think I was gonna offer like medication or like?
Yeah, like I was like not medication necessarily, but maybe that. I mean, like all the advice you gave was oriented around building community, building space, making sure that these people are this demographic is not an afterthought. And mashallah, like despite your accolades and despite like the amount of exposure you've had in the Muslim community, the different like initiatives that you have experienced, it was that one halaqah a week that you remember. It's the one halaqah a week that you've given a shout out multiple times in our conversation together. And it's like, I reflect for like in my own life, it's similar where, even though I may not have had like healthy male role models growing up, I had pseudo healthy male role models in the form of like an Islamic studies teacher who spent a little bit more extra time with me than they needed to, right? The imam who like, took the time to like ask me like, what's going on and stuff like that. And then YM also is a big one for me too, just like creating that space, making you feel normal, giving you the opportunity to play, to learn, to make mistakes amongst your peers in a manufactured way that doesn't exist in the real world, right? Or in like in outside like general society. So I really appreciate that. That's pretty awesome stuff there. That was so that was 1 and 2 for me in terms of reflections. I wanted to ask you, as a psychiatrist, so that's your practice, that's the work that you do. I know that a lot of the work you do is psychoeducational, but I'm sure like you also do you mentioned yourself like prescribe medicine and stuff like that. What are some myths that you think the Muslim community, like misconceptions they have when it comes to psychiatry as a practice? I've heard this, and feel free to give it as much importance or as little as you would like. But I've heard this when I'm working with people or in the Muslim community is like, I know that my friend, family member, spouse, myself, whoever it is struggling with so-and-so, but I just don't want to go to a psychiatrist because I know I'm going to get drugged up, right? It's like, and I don't, and then there seems to be this mistrust with like, doctors, but in particular when it comes to psychiatrists. What are things that you have noticed that seem to be like the common misconceptions, and what are ways that we can address that?
Sure, of course. So a lot of the misperceptions that are directed towards myself and our field really are rooted in cultural baggage, like a lot of cultural ignorance, and then a lot of societal baggage and a lot of societal ignorance. And so when you combine the two, it creates like a multi-layered effect where in terms of just larger American society, it's kind of frowned upon, for a man to like be in treatment, to be in psychiatric care. This is part of like a larger conversation surrounding like men's mental health, and why it's incredibly difficult for men to actually engage in like healthy emotional output for themselves. Because even in a treatment setting, it's seen as like a shameful thing. It seemed like it's like something discouraged. It's like, as a man, you're weak. And that's why you have to seek like professional care, professional help for yourself. You are incapable of having control over yourself. Therefore, you need a professional to do it for you. And then culturally, you add culture into that, which is in the Muslim community, you have a lot of like the South Asian culture, the Arab culture, the African culture, and much of this plays into that. Not only are we combining the American stigma towards men's mental health, you are now creating a separate culture and combining it together for a double stigma towards men seeking help and men seeking support. And this is something that you see negatively modeled in a lot of the previous generation of men in our Muslim community. Like a lot of the immigrant folks that come here, like for me, I grew up in the Desi community in New York. And it was, to my knowledge, when I was growing up here, it was unheard of for like a young Desi guy to go and talk to a therapist or to go talk to a psychiatrist. I don't recall anyone ever doing this or talking about this. And if someone by chance probably did, I can only imagine what the conversation around that would be amongst the other men, which is that like something's wrong with him. Like, he's like damaged, or he's psychotic, or he's like nuts, or he's like pagal, or he's like majnoon, or whatever it is. He's just someone who's like, something's wrong with him. And that's why he needs the psychiatrist. That's why he needs to go there. Or did you hear he's on meds? He's on psych meds. That must mean that like there's something like damage inside of him, or he's like emotionally or mentally broken and he needs this stuff, or he's like possessed by a jinn and this is what he's doing. Much of this is steeped in a lack of understanding and a lack of awareness for what this field is and what we do in our field. What I would say to everybody listening or to anybody watching, right now, it is my job as a psychiatrist to understand what is hurting you inside. Like for me as a doctor, the whole point of a doctor is the elimination of pain, the reduction of pain. Other doctors work in other sites with whatever they do for themselves. GI doctor works on your stomach pain. Endocrinologist works on like, pain related to your hormones. Neurologist works on like neurological pain. For me as a psychiatrist, I work on the pain that you cannot see. And this is the pain that comes from emotions, emotional pain, trauma, hurt, rejection, heartbreak, things that have wounded you internally. And so it's my job to help kind of repair that. I don't perceive, the way I see it, I don't perceive there to be anything that makes you less of a man or less masculine or less of a Muslim or less capable as a father, as a brother, as a son, or whatever position you have as a young Muslim man. I don't perceive anything in this treatment to make you less than who and what you are. I think a lot of what is painted as like red pill alpha, like this big macho Chad kind of thing, is that like you're so strong and so tough and so stoic that like you never need this, you're not going to rely on this. I find that to be like counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense to me. I would see, like, it's the equivalent of me seeing a guy coughing and hacking up like blood from his lungs because he has like an infection, and saying like, I'm such a strong guy, like look how alpha I am, like I'm gonna walk this off. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's not masculine. That's just idiocy. Like, you can actually get help for yourself. You can become a stronger man if you get treatment, and you'll be stronger and you'll be tougher. Like, how does it make you tougher to suffer? It doesn't click for me. It doesn't make sense for me. Like, so the way I see it is that if you want to equate this, think of it as like, if you're going to treat an infection, if you're a guy, if you're going to like roll your ankle when you're playing ball and like actually like hop off the field and rehabilitate your ankle to keep playing more in your future, then think of your emotions the same way as a rolled ankle. Think of it as you have actually fractured something inside your heart, or fractured something in the way you think or feel. And the way for you to become stronger and healthier as a man is to repair that, is to fix that, and to come back twice as hard, from whatever it is that you felt has wounded you. And so my job as a psychiatrist is to offer you like multiple methods by which I can help you recover. One of which is medication. And medication will be reserved for if you have symptoms that are severe enough or strong enough that it's really debilitating for you. And then I would offer you medication for like an anxiety attack, or offer you medication for like, depression, or offer you medication for like mood dysregulation or whatever it may be that's like ailing you. But the mainstay of my treatment is actually not medication. That's not the actual central focus of what I do. The central focus of what I do is actually therapy. And therapy is talking. It's just expression. It's you bringing me your pain and hurt, expressing your pain and hurt, me holding it for you, kind of organizing it, making sense of where it came from, what it's doing to you, and then helping you to move forward in a way that you don't carry this pain with you and then hurt others in the process, for that. That's essentially the gist of it. So like when people hear this stuff, I want them to know that like when you come to see a therapist, when you come to see a psychiatrist, it is, in my opinion, actually even more masculine of you to do that. You actually become a stronger, better, more safe, more secure, and more masculine version of yourself, when you actually get help and support, for that. There is absolutely no weakness in seeking this. There's only strength in seeking help and support for that. I'm going to self-disclose. I have been in therapy myself this is now coming on 5 years. I've been in therapy, and my therapist is someone that I meet with once a week, every week, 45 minutes. And I talk about everything, anything and everything that has bothered me, that's affecting me, that's weighing on me. And going to therapy has honestly made me a better person. Genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, it's made me a better person, doing this. I'm stronger. I'm more secure. I'm more emotionally flexible. I'm someone who is confident, who is self-assured. I don't have the kind of fear of insecurities getting out that I did before. Like my insecurities are my armor now. You can't hurt me with it. I've hurt myself way more than you could ever hurt me. And now I've learned to heal from that. There's no more hurt, from this. And I think that that's something that I would strongly recommend. Like you said before, Dan, which is that like, some young boy listening to this who feels lost or lonely and can't connect to a masjid, can't even connect online, doesn't really know who to go to or who to turn to. Truthfully speaking, if you really are suffering and struggling like this, I strongly recommend it. Get help for yourself. See a therapist. Talk to someone. And if you need help on how to do this, the Family Youth Institute at the FYI.org has actually a bunch of resources that you can actually click through and like look through to get that kind of footing, for yourself. So that's what I would say. To any of the men listening to me, don't become products of another generational cycle of like trauma and abuse. Like we've suffered from enough of that as Muslim men. We really have, and there's no reason to self-inflict it or to continue to allow our own families or our own communities to continue to inflict it upon us.
Yeah. By the way, very powerful stuff, and I really appreciate how you framed it, because the traits that you were talking about that you get as a result of therapy are deeply masculine.
Yeah.
Are things that we seek out for ourselves growing up. It's what we aspire to. It's what we see in the heroes. It's in the video games that we play as the main character. Those are things that we're looking for, and subhanallah, through that deep work, we can attain that, right, or pursue attaining it. I wanted to ask you from the perspective of a parent who is concerned about, I want to send my someone who I love. It could be, I know we're talking about parents a lot, so sure, maybe a brother or a friend or whoever, right? Someone who you love and care for, you want to recommend or encourage them or urge them firmly to go seek help, because you know that they're just simply, just to summarize, they're simply not okay. They're not doing okay. But they have concerns of, as a result of seeking treatment or as a result of seeking help, that may be strayed away from their spiritual anchor or their cultural anchor. How can we address these misconceptions? I know that you share that when you work as a clinician, you're Muslim one, but medicine is not the first thing that you recommend. Explain to me, maybe from your own practice or what you see that works. How do we balance medical care and spiritual care and be aware of just the cultural sensitivities that one comes with as a client?
So this is something that is It's kind of hard, Dan, because
Yeah.
it really depends on your provider and who you see. Like I can tell you that if you're worried about someone's spiritual health and you want them to get spiritually healthy at the same time that they become emotionally healthy, you don't want their therapy or their treatment to actually detract from like their spirituality or their identity as like a Muslim, for that, then yes, you can actually pursue, Islamically integrated psychotherapy, or you can pursue a provider who is Muslim and provides like therapy services, for them. That way, there is a certain level of comfort that like, okay, I'm comfortable to talk about my Muslim identity or the parts of me that are Muslim, that influence heavily, like what I perceive and what I feel and how I think and how I act, for them, and I want to protect that, and then you can have that for sure. You can have that. A lot of people fear that if you go see a therapist or you go see a psychiatrist and they're not Muslim, they're non-Muslim, that somehow, some way you're going to lose your faith, or they're going to like encourage things that are going to be like antithetical to your faith, or like lead you astray, or you'll no longer be like Muslim anymore. For that, I mean, that's like, it's not true. It doesn't work like that. Therapy is something where you get out what you put in, what you invest, what you bring is what you receive from that. And another thing that's about therapy that's important is I like to think of therapy as like a restaurant. Just because you go to one therapist and it's a bad experience and you don't really like it, doesn't mean that you swear off of therapy or therapy doesn't work on you and like, it's not for you, or whatever. It's the equivalent of like me going to a restaurant and I don't like the way the dish was prepared. And then I step out of the restaurant and I swear to everybody, I will never eat again. I'm going to starve. It doesn't make sense. It's like you had one bad dish at one bad restaurant, so you're going to starve and die as a result. So if you have a family member or a friend, anyone in your family that you feel is resistant towards this, isn't really jiving, doesn't feel like, I'm not going to do therapy, or I'm scared of therapy, or I'm frightened of what might happen, or I feel like you'll judge me, for that. What I would say is that like listen to our podcast, like listen to the way Dan and I are talking to each other. Like, Dan and I are both like in this field together, doing this kind of work, helping people with their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions. It's a very human thing, to do this. And believe me, like when you find the right person and you connect with the right provider, it's like magic. It feels, it's incredible, the feeling that you have from that, life changing, honestly, for a lot of people. So I would strongly recommend that, and if someone is very hesitant or someone's very scared, then honestly have the conversation yourself with them. Actually tell them like, hey man, what's going on? Like, tell me more about what's going on. And would it help if I went with you to a session? Or would it help if I started therapy and I told my therapist about you and then you join a session? I like to think of it as like when you're in an airplane and in the event of cabin pressure dropping, the stewardess will always tell you that in the event of a drop in cabin pressure in the airplane, secure your mask first before you secure the mask of the person sitting next to you. And that to me is huge in the field of mental health, because if you're in a family system in which you have a big brother or an uncle or a cousin or a father, whatever male or whatever person in your family that is negatively impacting you, you shouldn't point your finger and be like, well, that person needs therapy, get them into therapy. The truth is, no, you secure your own mask first. You are the product of the damage your family has inflicted upon you, or the love and support your family has given to you. You're the balance of both for yourself. So for you, the listener listening to this, if you're struggling getting someone else into therapy, maybe the solution starts with you yourself doing that, and so that's what I would recommend.
I love this because I was going to ask that exact question. Like, what do you think, folks who know someone who's struggling, what is the best way that they can help support them? And I love the way that you put it. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Before we conclude, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So a lot of things are going on in today's time, right?
Yeah.
There's things going on politically, there's things going on economically, there's things, like I'm sure that affects, like, especially since we're talking about men's mental health. Let's say we're talking to someone who is fresh out of college or has been out of college, has been working, maybe has their first big boy job, economy hits them, whatever it is, right? A lot of uncertainty. And with that, you can imagine the pressure and the struggle that one may be facing. And they might be feeling isolated to being able to communicate that, whether they're going through LinkedIn and they're not, they're not seeing anyone bite with all the interviews that they're doing, or, they have these commitments that they made to themselves, or the pressure that they're feeling in their family, and they have more questions than answers. What is something you would leave them with to help them navigate through all that?
I'll say validation. And this is something that I talk about a lot whenever I talk about like my own personal, experience with mental health, was that, the areas of growth for me, the places where I truly felt like I grew the most, as Omar, as like, a man, as a Muslim, were the lowest points in my life, like the points in my life in which I truly felt like I failed. For me, that's when I really needed to like tell myself, okay, Omar, like you can't be a pretender anymore. You can't just like perform or pretend or to be something that you're not. Allah is literally putting you on your knees right now, and you're in a position where the best thing for you now is to actually beseech him and say like, okay, I don't know where to go or what to do. I need help. And that was it. Like that, these are like the turning points in your life, which is that one direction you can go in, which is a very negative direction, or you can go in a more positive direction. And it's hard. It's difficult. It sucks. It's a struggle. You're going to have people in your life who put you down, who insult you, who make this process so much more difficult than it has to be. You're going to have internal thoughts and internal dialogues that insult you and put you down and put you in a much more negative space than anything external could possibly do to you. And the most important thing that I'm going to beseech to all of these people listening to me who feel this way is, first and foremost, that there is a hope for you and there is a way forward for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a treatment for every single affliction except for one, and that's death. So long as you are alive, you have the wherewithal and the ability to seek treatment, to seek help for yourself. Like, that is literally Allah's word, like affirming this of you, that like you can get help, you can get treatment, you can get better. It's Allah's promise to you that you can and you will. For that, it just requires that you tie your camel and then place your faith.
All it takes is just one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
This is wow. I mean, that is a beautiful way to end this conversation, man. Dr. Omar, I don't want to end, but I think we've given our audience a lot to think about.
Yeah. For sure.
Before we conclude,
Mm-hmm.
You're doing great work, man. We talked a lot about the different affiliations you have.
Mm-hmm.
Where can people find you and the work that you do?
Well, there's one way to find me, and I hope people don't find me that way, which is, if you get yourself like psychiatrically admitted to the hospital and referred to my clinic, I would not recommend that. But what I would say is that, if anyone wants to reach out and connect with me, I'm a very proud card-carrying member of the Family and Youth Institute. It's something that, it's one of, like, for me, one of the things that I'm most proud of is like being part of this organization. So if you go to the FYI.org, you can look at our speaker listing. You'll actually find me there. I have my own page there, and you can certainly connect with me through the FYI. That's one way to reach me. And the other way to reach me is through a lot of my Islamic work. So like if you're a part of Muslim Interscholastic Tournament, or if you're a part of like Young Muslims, you can certainly find me through those avenues as well. And I'm always open to having like these kind of conversations. Like, I love this stuff, genuinely. Like for Dan and I, really, this felt like it was just us like having a conversation. Yeah. It didn't feel like it was like a lecture. This was like, like an academic, like, exercise or whatever. Like, for me, mental health is just a heart to heart. So like, if you are someone who wants to have a heart to heart, then like, hey, I'm always game, for that. So those are the ways in which you can reach me. If you need to reach me more professionally, like specifically clinically, like as a psychiatrist, then that would be like for myself, Dr. Omar Shareef. And I work at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center in Queens Village, New York. I practice in the state of New York. Unfortunately, I don't have a medical license outside of New York, so I can't do much outside other than just talk about a topic. I can't render treatment. But if you are seeking psychiatric services or you need mental health support services, like, that's where you can reach me, through that avenue. But, I just want to give a very special shout out to, my man, Dan, for just being like so awesome, for creating this platform letting us talk about this. And like I told you guys before, like if you really genuinely love this episode and like you love what we talked about and how we did this, like I'm hoping inshallah this becomes a full series for the FYI, so it won't just be just one conversation. I hope that you like, follow, subscribe, and pass this along to anybody else. I know it's a rather lengthy conversation, but if you're driving in the car or just listening, with your headset, or you just want to learn more about the work that we do, Dan and I have not only just had this conversation. There's like a bunch of other workshops and a bunch of other materials that we have available for you. So don't only think this is the one way to engage with us. There's plenty of other ways to do it. So Jazakallah khair, and thank you guys so much. And thank you, Dan, too, for this beautiful conversation.
Of course, we really appreciate having you. It's always a pleasure talking to you and learning from you. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to listening to this. We are hoping that it was a benefit to you, and follow along. This is a much needed conversation when it comes to Muslim mental health. Obviously, we're talking about men's mental health in this episode, but we're going to have many episodes in the pipeline talk about different issues and challenges that Muslims face throughout their lifespan, especially when it comes to their mental wellness. So stay tuned, and thank you for tuning in. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.